Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this Lifelink Workwell webinar. Our topic today is Beyond the Symptoms, Building a Menopause-Friendly Workplace Culture. So while we're waiting on everyone else joining us, I want to welcome our panellists. Hello ladies, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy days to be here and to share your expertise. On our panel today, we have Lindsay Hume, Training and Development Manager and Menopause Champion and Expert at Lifelink and Lifelink Workwell, Jennifer Gordon, HR Director for Lifelink and Lifelink Workwell, and Wendy Hampson, Service Manager at Lifelink. Just a little bit of housekeeping for our audience. We are in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions or any thoughts or anything that you want to share with us, please use the text box and we'll pick these up towards the end. I'm going to hand over to the member of our panel now for a short introduction from each of them. So Lindsay, let's just start with you.
Thank you, Felice, and thanks everyone for attending. My name, as Felice says, is Lindsay. I'm the Training and Development Manager here at Lifelink Workwell, and I manage, develop and facilitate the wellbeing education sessions, both face-to-face and online within the workplace. In regards to menopause, I've had quite a bit of experience in the last few years within businesses and how we support which we'll probably speak about during the next 45 minutes, but how we support with education sessions, educating staff members, as well as menopause drop-in sessions as well, which have been really effective.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Jennifer, you're up next.
Hi, thanks, Felice. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Gordon. I am the HR Director at Lifelink. My role obviously entails everything HR, but for me personally, it's about making sure that diversity and inclusion is there and that we have that open culture within our organisation. Lots of experience with regards to menopause, whether that is personally or with our staff members within Lifelink. So I'm really excited to see and hear what everybody has to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And lastly, Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Hampson. I'm one of the service managers here at Lifelink. I've got over 30 years experience managing teams and individuals. So menopause has come up more and more over the last few years. It's become more apparent. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some tips and tools with you for things that I've either supported with or coached my team with on all things menopause.
Thank you, Wendy. So thanks, everyone. And let's move on to our first topic. We've got a number of topics to cover off today, so let's see where the conversation will take us. And while today's session will focus on menopause and its impact, I think it's important to recognise that menopause isn't just a women's issue. It can also affect transgender and non-binary people who may face unique and tailored, really tailored support and understanding in the workplace. So let's keep that in mind as we go through today. So before we start, let's do a bit of scene setting so that we can all begin to understand menopause in the workplace a little bit better. So Lindsay, let's start with a question for you. Menopause is no longer a taboo subject, but there are many misconceptions around it. As employers and work colleagues, what are some of the key factors we should know and we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Felice. But menopause is definitely no longer a taboo that it once was, but it's so true that the misconceptions still persist. To create a menopause-friendly culture in the workplace, it's important to address these misunderstandings and focus on those key facts. A few examples are menopause is a normal and natural part of life. It's not a full medical condition. It typically occurs between the ages of 45 and 55, although some experience it earlier or later. Early menopause can be down to health conditions, specifically affecting your chromosome levels or your thyroid levels, toxins from cancer treatments, surgeries like hysterectomies. Menopausal symptoms can last on average for 7 years, and it's estimated that more than a third of women experience long-term menopausal symptoms, which may continue for a number of years beyond that. Menopause naturally appears in 3 stages, so perimenopause, menopause, and then postmenopause. And each of these stages come with their own unique timelines and list of symptoms. Doctors report that there's actually 62 different symptoms of menopause that women present with. However, the focus is usually on hot flushes, night sweats, insomnia, and mood swings. But other predominant symptoms which can cause issues in the workplace are things like brain fog, memory loss, concentration issues, and loss of confidence. Now, some people will go through menopause without symptoms. However, there's been a few studies that show the significant impact that these symptoms have within the workplace. There was a survey in May 2022 from the Fawcett Society, which was based on, believe it or not, the largest ever survey of menopause and perimenopausal women in the UK, for over 4,000 women. And it revealed a kind of shocking lack of support for menopause within the workplace. A few examples in that survey were 41% say that they've seen menopause or menopausal symptoms treated as a joke by people at work. And among women who had taken time off due to menopause, 39% had cited anxiety or depression as the main reason on their sick note, rather than share their menopause status. CIPD also surveyed over 2,000 women in 2023, and they found that 1 in 6 have considered leaving work due to lack of support in relation to their menopausal symptoms, and a further 6% have left work. Last fact, that more than 10% of people feel discriminated against because of their menopausal symptoms. Now, there's approximately 13 million peri or postmenopausal women in the UK. So if we take those percentages as an average, there are millions of women in the workplace feeling the need to disguise this natural process of their life due to the misconceptions that are existing. There's no one size that fits all. Every single woman will experience it differently. There's no right age to start menopause. As I've discussed, there's an average age of 45 to 55. However, it can come at an earlier or later time. Menopause means more than hot flushes and mood swings. Yeah, they're both common, but they're not the only symptoms. And menopause does not have a time frame. There's no specific time frame. It varies from person to person. So creating a menopause-friendly culture starts with awareness and understanding. And by acknowledging the diversity of symptoms, accommodating needs and fostering an open communication, employers and colleagues can empower individuals to thrive during this time and stage of their life. So just to remember really that supporting menopause isn't just about improving well-being, it's about retaining those experienced, valuable employees and creating an inclusive workplace for everyone.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was really insightful and some great stats and figures in there. So kind of moving on from that, Wendy, I've got a question for you. How can managers therefore recognise the difference between menopause symptoms versus illness or even underperformance?
Thank you. I think Lindsay's given us a real great explanation of what menopause is, and it's something that we really can't afford to overlook now within the workplace. We really understand the symptoms can be wide-ranging, affecting not only physical, but obviously cognitive and confidence, as well as mental well-being. But as managers, our challenge is knowing what that is and how we actually manage that. It's understanding how we can respond to employees' struggles, how we differentiate between what menopause symptoms and illness are versus genuine performance issues. And more importantly, how do we approach a situation, especially with empathy, fairness and professionalism, because we want to make people feel heard within the workplace. So kind of breaking it down a wee bit, as Lindsay had highlighted, menopause symptoms, that brain fog, fatigue, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, can really be easily mistaken for stress or burnout or disengagement, people not really being interested at work. But assuming that an employee is underperforming due to a lack of effort, we need to consider some key questions. So first of all, is there a pattern? So one of the things a manager can do is really look at historically, how does that individual normally perform within your team? Are they a high performer? Are they suddenly distracted, forgetful and overwhelmed? It could be menopause related, but it could also be anything else. So Are they experiencing fluctuation performance? So some weeks they're great, some weeks they're turning up doing everything they need to do, and other weeks they're really, really struggling. And inconsistency is a key one that we would look out for, especially with menopause. Are they disengaged or just exhausted? So fatigue and sleep, as Lindsay had mentioned, are really common menopause symptoms. And if someone feels really withdrawn or lacking energy, it might not be because they're not motivated. It could be that chronic tiredness that comes from it. Speaking from experience, I've been there myself. But it could be another health condition at play as well. So menopause is one possibility, but we should never assume that any woman of a certain age is going through menopause. So one of the worst things we can do is tip everybody into that. Other conditions, depression, anxiety, even long-term illness. We need to approach these conversations with open, non-judgmental conversations. So that is the big key. So my kind of practical steps for managers and how I support my teams and coach my teams is once you've identified someone struggling, it's how we approach that conversation and balancing that support of what the business needs and avoiding those biases of assumptions. So really starting with those check-in conversations. If you can, a wee walk and talk, a coffee, a chat, make it really informal. Nobody wants to feel as if they're being put on the spot, and don't always leave it until it's a formal kind of official one-to-one meeting. So don't bag it all up. If you can see that these things are happening on a regular basis, have a chat. Make sure that chat's in a safe and confidential space. So having a chat next to someone's desk in the office is probably not the best place for them to open up. So we would really recommend creating that kind of safe and confidential space without making assumptions, and actually just ask the question, I've noticed that you seem a bit overwhelmed, or I noticed that you're struggling a wee bit. Is there anything that we can chat about that we can do to help you? So avoid making assumptions about their age and their gender just because they're a woman, and over 40 doesn't mean that that's what it is, and some people really don't take well to that. So a key approach is using everybody and discussing that as an individual with them, and really balancing support with performance expectations. So if it's really impacting their work, what is the kind of things that we can do? What reasonable adjustments can we think about? So flexibility, especially when we're talking about disturbed sleep, things like that. Allowing later start times. Remote working for those struggling with fatigue. We know from the teams that I've managed that that works really, really well, because some people just are not functioning first thing in the morning, or they function really well early on in the day, but as the day goes on, their energy levels really deplete. Workload adjustments, so maybe some temporary changes that maybe require that intensity. So we're talking about that cognitive function and brain fog. So it can be a real issue. So actually things that need real intense concentration, could that maybe be delegated to someone else? Could they pick something else up? Signposting to other supports, I think, is really crucial as well. Managers are not experts in this. We can support, we can build their knowledge, we can build their skills, but there are other services out there that we can support our colleagues with. So directing them to EAPs, if you've got them in place, occupational health, internal menopause policies, or internal menopause groups, if you've got things like that on the go that really help build that knowledge of what's available to them to support them. It doesn't mean lowering their standards indefinitely, because I can see a lot of people will think, well, how do we still get the job done if we're moving all these things? It's really about supporting that person and managing it. As I say, sometimes they can get onto the right medication, or they can get other supports in place, which really help balance along with the other reasonable adjustments that you put in place. So last wee bit for me is just about the kind of bigger picture for managers. It really is about getting this right. It's so important that we retain, as Lindsay had said earlier, those experienced employees who might otherwise feel forced to leave due to unmanaged symptoms. And there is a high number of amazing female their employment because they think that they're just not able to do their job anymore and the supports aren't in place for them. So we're really looking to support to create that workplace culture, as Lindsay had said, where people feel really comfortable coming and seeking support without fear or stigma or judgment, and not being able to go for those promotions because people think they're menopausal. There is a big thing, and I know that Jen will probably talk a wee bit about that. So It's not our role to make, as managers, to make diagnoses or make assumptions, but to notice changes and ask the right questions and offer support. Thank you.
That's fabulous. Thanks so much for that, Wendy. Some really good advice there. So let's start thinking about those practical supports that you were speaking about, Wendy, that employers and managers, what we need to do to support our organisations. So moving to you, Jennifer, how can employers improve support for colleagues experiencing menopause and improve support for their line managers too?
Lise. I think Wendy actually covered quite a bit of it in her answer before. There are lots of quick and easy fixes that you can make. However, there is a lot that we can do long term as well. I think what we need to be mindful about is it can be classed as a disability. It's a long term health condition that lasts over 12 months. So, as an employer, you need to be very mindful that you're not potentially discriminating against anybody, because then you could be taken to a tribunal for discrimination. So as employers, we need to be making reasonable adjustments. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. Start encouraging those conversations about it. So providing that sympathetic and appropriate support. And as Wendy had said, it could be flexible working, which could be more frequent breaks, changes to the start and finish times, working from home, but also having a comfortable temperature in offices that sometimes you don't think about. How many times have we all sat in the office and one person is roasting and the other people are freezing? So we have to be very mindful of what's a comfortable temperature for everyone. And ensuring water is available. So these are the basic things that we can do. The other thing is obviously a flexible dress code as well. We're reasonable when you're getting into the summertime. You know, people need to be, cooler. So it might be that they're wearing a vest top instead of, a long sleeved top. So just being mindful with that and encouraging our employees to be open with their line managers as well, which we know can be difficult. Having a really good menopause policy in place shows that you take it seriously and that you care, and also that the line managers are knowledgeable through awareness sessions and know what support is available. So we know that a lot of people find it difficult having certain conversations or find it a bit awkward, particularly when you're not used to having those conversations or if you're not knowledgeable on the topic. So it's ensuring as an employer we are providing that information to them, whether that is through policies, awareness sessions, but also that they are properly trained on how to have those difficult conversations, which we all tend to do when we start to become managers in an organisation. Probably the main thing for me, prep in advance. If you know you're going to have an awkward conversation, prep what you're going to be asking. So what underlying questions could we be asking someone? What could be asked, and having that knowledge in advance, knowing organisations that we can put them in touch with. Could it be involving occupational health? Could it be referring somebody to the EAP for counselling? Or if you don't have an EAP, then looking at counselling sessions that you could have for your employees to help them going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So moving on from all of those different supports, Wendy, in your experience, what can line managers do to kind of open up conversations with employees and create that supportive environment that we're all looking to create within our workforce and organisations?
If only we all had a magic wand and it was very, very easy for everyone. I think the key thing we can do is really support our managers on how they open up those conversations and foster those truly supportive kind of environments and conversations. So really about being informed, building trust and taking some action. A well-informed manager is always a better equipped manager, I think, as we've kind of highlighted throughout this. But I think all managers attending, whether that be male or female, and I know for some males it can feel a bit more awkward, but actually women really appreciate the fact if people are open and honest with them, it'll not matter who it comes from. So we need a better understanding of basic menopause, and I think we still struggle in a lot of organisations to even get to that basic level for our managers. So attending training. So menopause awareness isn't really just a nice to have anymore. It's really part of being responsible and inclusive leaders. And talking to the team about the training that you've been on and sharing that with everyone. So it's an open topic rather than bringing it up just at that one person. So it's really good to be sharing that knowledge of the training that you're attending with the team. I think, as Jen said, familiarise yourself with the policies, what adjustments and supports are available, what can you offer before you go in and have those chats, and how do we guide employees towards them. And again, knowing your options, flexible working, it's not always easy to put in. So knowing what you've got and how you can support someone through the EAPs, OC Health, things like that, could really make a meaningful difference to someone. As I said before, we don't need to be experts in it, but we need to be prepared. And I think Jen kind of said that as well. If we're putting uninformed managers in front of people who've got menopause issues, you really risk that shutdown of conversation before they even begin. It is still a bit of a taboo subject, no matter how much we talk about it. We're getting into a much better culture of there's awareness raising across the board, but there are still a lot of situations where people in certain industries really don't feel comfortable talking about it for fear that it really will knock their progression. So my kind of second key thing would be creating that safe and confidential space so that an employee really can feel comfortable speaking up. And this is where that trust comes in with your managers, really building that culture where employees feel safe to discuss that or any personal challenges that they have. So we need to demonstrate that confidentiality and integrity. Employees need to know that what they share with you is not going to go around the office, that it is about just them and what they need. And it's about leading by example. If managers are dismissive or avoid those topics or have a joke about it in the office, employees really won't feel safe opening up about it. And normalising these conversations, we don't need to wait for it to rise. And that's what I was saying earlier about the training. Really share the things that you're actively involved in. And Jen was talking about it. I know we do menopause cafes and things. Really having that active within the workplace. And sharing those resources and making sure it's part of those team discussions and helping remove stigma. Open conversations offer practical support. So instead of asking the wrong questions, try and keep it as open questions. So kind of you seem to be struggling, what's wrong? Maybe try and rephrase some of those to, I've noticed you've not been yourself lately. How are you doing? Is there anything we can do to support you with your workload? Those really open conversations invite discussion and rather than feeling someone pinned into a box. As I say, we talked about it earlier, practical support, those flexible working, workload adjustments, just regular check-ins. Someone might feel that they're trying to cope or they're already putting steps in and they actually don't need a work intervention. But I think just saying to them, well, look, let's stick 10 minutes in the diary once a week and if you need it, come and talk to me. And if you feel that things are escalating, we can have another look at it. But leaving it as that it's up to that employee what they want and to have them have a bit of control. Menopause makes you feel a bit out of control with everything. So especially if you're used to being a person who's in control within work, within your work environment and what you do, conversation with your manager where you've still got a bit of control over those conversations really can make a huge difference. Thank you.
Brilliant, Lindy. Thank you so much. You did mention some really good things around there. And I think, Lindsay, maybe a question for you is, talking about gender and age bias around menopause, how can we tackle that in the workplace?
Yeah, gender and age bias surrounding menopause that can create barriers to inclusivity and fairness in the workplace. And to address these issues effectively, we need a varied approach that breaks that stigma and fosters understanding. And I know Jennifer and Wendy have mentioned a couple of them, but I just want to reiterate them within this answer. Normalise conversations about menopause. That's the first step in tackling bias, is bringing menopause into everyday workplace discussions, just like any other health and wellbeing topic. Host awareness sessions, lunch and learns, which will educate employees at all levels about menopause. And it helps to kind of demystify the experience and dismantle any stereotypes that menopause is purely a women's issue or older staff it's only relevant to. And I've seen this in the workplace in the last few years. Our lunch and learn sessions with different businesses have seen a significant increase in attendees of a younger demographic coming to these sessions, stating that they want to learn more to help support either their colleagues or people that they manage. Another thing might be provide education and training. Again, I know that everyone else has spoke about it, but to train managers to recognise and address gender and bias related to menopause and equip them to have that open and supportive conversation with their team members. Include menopause as a part of a broader diversity and inclusion training. Emphasise how bias around menopause can compound other forms of workplace discrimination, which Jen had touched on. Again, I've seen this and how this works in examples in real life. We specifically offer a Men in Menopause in the workplace, which is an education session aimed at male management and staff members who want to understand more about the symptoms and support staff and colleagues. And I'll say that these sessions begin, they can be pretty quiet and there's not much conversation flowing. However, by the end of the session, the male attendees are vocal and they ask the correct question, which in turn shows me that the bias barriers have been well and truly broken down. I've seen male managers re-attend these sessions, bringing examples of how having an understanding has supported them managing not only staff but family and friends that are going through this natural stage of life. Another thing might be addressing stereotypes head on, challenge the narrative that menopause equates to being less capable or less productive, share success stories and examples of employees that are thriving during this stage of life. Now, 1 in 3 females go through menopause and don't have symptoms. So we then don't want to label this as everyone is going to have issues with it. There will be people who will be thriving at that time of life, so celebrate them. And reframe menopause as part of a career journey rather than an endpoint. Highlight that value of experience, the leadership, the institutional knowledge that employees bring during that time. Again, just to repeat, we've said about developing inclusive policies and practices, implementing menopause policies that clearly outlines the available support, the flexible working we've spoke about, reasonable adjustments, and access to resources, and ensure the policies are gender neutral and inclusive. Just to remind everyone that transgender and non-binary individuals may also experience menopause, so it's vital to use inclusive language and support structures. A few other things: promote intergenerational understanding. Bias often stems from lack of understanding between generations. Even though this is a natural process that every woman is going to go through, you can facilitate mentoring or knowledge sharing programs that connect employees of different ages, and use these programs to foster empathy and collaboration, breaking down the assumptions about, oh, they're in a bad mood, oh, they must be going through menopause, age-related capabilities. A few others: creating a workplace culture where employees feel comfortable requesting adjustments regardless of gender or age, and that benefits everyone, not just people experiencing menopause. And celebrate the flexibility as a strength, showing that accommodating diverse needs contributes to better outcomes for employees. And creating supportive networks, encourage the formation of menopause support groups, employee resource groups, and these spaces allow employees to share experiences and advice without fear of judgment. Again, we offer a menopause drop-in session, and that allows anyone of any age and gender to drop in for a few minutes and ask questions that they maybe don't want to ask colleagues or management. And not only do these drop-in sessions offer flexibility for staff, but also the awareness that you're not alone in the workplace. Staff share their experience and support each other. And every time I facilitate one of these menopause drop-ins, it's unique and it's inspiring watching staff feel supported through their workplace. So just to conclude, that tackling gender and age bias around menopause, it's not just about supporting individuals, it's about fostering that culture of inclusivity, empathy and respect. And by normalising these conversations and addressing those stereotypes, by maybe embedding inclusive policies, and workplaces can create that environment where everyone feels valued, regardless of the stage of their life.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Lindsay. Some great takeaways and some really good ideas in there. So thanks for that. And you spoke a lot about, additional support services. So Jennifer, a quick question for you. What additional support services are available for organisations looking to enhance their menopause support?
There's quite a lot, and there's probably more than you realise. So naturally, everyone will go to, and I'd mentioned it, your occupational health, your EAPs. However, some organisations might not use an EAP, so then you might want to organise counselling for them. But there's other things, because menopause can make you feel different ways. I mean, there's suicide awareness sessions that people can attend. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but everybody's different in their symptoms with menopause. So suicide awareness is something that is incredibly important. The menopause awareness sessions that we've spoken about, I mean, I can't, champion them enough, to be honest with you, because that is for absolutely everybody in the organisation. And as Lindsay said, it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your age is, you're aware of what's going on. And I know personally my husband finds it very useful because he now understands what a woman is going through for menopause and is probably more supportive. And well, he's not probably, he is more supportive at home. But there are other organisations that are available, depending on what your employee is looking for. Another thing that both Wendy and Lindsay touched on, having a menopause cafe in your organisation. So we have a menopause cafe which is every quarter, various times, various days, where people can just drop in and have a chat. They can have a cry, they can have a moan, they can laugh. It's actually really interesting because you think you're the only person that is going through menopause. And it's really interesting to hear what other people are going through, and it can make you feel that little bit better of it's not just me, it's everybody else. So the menopause cafes aren't about getting a speaker to come and talk about it or trying to sell particular products. It's just everyday people coming and having a conversation of, oh, for goodness sake, this is what happened to me yesterday. The other thing I would say as well is leadership training. So you do want to have that training for your managers for having those difficult conversations, but also having reflective practice for your managers as well, so that they've got somebody that they can go and talk to about what had happened and had they done it right and how can we do it better going forward. So yeah, there's lots and lots of services that are available. That's
Brilliant.
just some.
That is fantastic, Jennifer. I'm sure it gives lots of people some great ideas. Now, it probably won't surprise you to know that we've had lots of questions during the session. So we'll try and get through as many of these as we can. But if we haven't addressed your question by the end of our time today, we will come back to you with a response. So let's have a look at the first question that's come in. This is a really interesting one. So I'm going to throw it out to the panel for response. So the first question is, our team is about 70% male, and a lot of them feel embarrassed having any sort of conversation around women's health. That leaves our female colleagues often feeling unsupported in their teams and by their managers. How can we better educate the men in our company to create a more inclusive environment?
Yeah, I can go first on this, so that's okay. It's so true that men's discomfort around menopause is there, and we have to call it out. And it's natural for them to not feel comfortable discussing it. But that also all stems from the lack of understanding. And employers can address this by, we've already spoke about providing menopause awareness training. I'd said about the men in menopause and how successful that's been throughout the businesses that I've facilitated it in. And because you see them come back and ask questions, you hear in the menopause drop-in clinics sessions that we do, they'll say, oh, my manager went on this and he now understands, or he's now been able to change things on it. So it really does open that kind of barrier, or break down that barrier that is up, in regards to men not really wanting or feeling comfortable enough in discussing it. We've spoke about normalising conversations through communications. It should be as openly discussed as other workplace wellbeing topics, using newsletters, digital content, posters, and maybe using data and real life case studies, share statistics. They're all out there if you go looking for them, that can help men to understand the impact that menopause has on productivity, engagement, and mental health. And I can't remember if it was Wendy or Jennifer, sorry, that had mentioned that it's not about always being the negative of you're going through menopause, so it's going to be a negative impact in your work life. If we can help support staff throughout this, it ensures that they'll thrive in that place, and it might be a case of they thrive better than they ever have been because they feel that support. And lastly, really is encouraging an open dialogue, and provide anonymous Q&A opportunities maybe, where men can ask questions in a safe place without that fear of, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing? So ultimately, kind of the goal is to remove that stigma that I spoke about earlier, and equip our male colleagues with the knowledge and confidence to support the female teammates.
Brilliant. Does anyone want to add anything to Lindsay's comments?
I think Lindsay's, covered loads there, and it is really good, really knowledgeable. I think the other thing we've talked about as well is just that making sure that they're prepped, having that conversation beforehand, making sure, as Lindsay had said, that they have that knowledge. So yes, we understand you might be embarrassed. Yes, we understand you might be a bit awkward, but how do we get them to come out of that comfort zone and feel more relaxed about having that conversation?
Brilliant.
And I think it needs to happen as well. I'd mentioned that there's a figure of 13 million females going through menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause at this time. And that's a lot of our workforce within the UK. So it is something that kind of we need to highlight and educate people on to be more comfortable with it.
Brilliant. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, got another question here, again, another really, really interesting one. So this one says, we are mainly based remotely, so it can be difficult to pick up if a colleague or employees are having a hard time and may be suffering menopausal symptoms. What suggestions do you have for recognising these, and how can we subtly broach the conversation?
I'll pick this up if I think through COVID, there's so many organisations now that are spread all over the place and working remotely, which has got some fantastic opportunities for people. But it has diluted what we see, or what we used to see as the normal, where your team members would be sitting round about you and you would see some of those changes that were happening within them. But I think regular check-ins, supportive workplaces don't happen by accident. It really is managers training and taking that time to get to know their employees, which is even more important when you're working remotely and you've got a team that work remotely. So putting that time in, not just for formal one-to-ones, but for wee check-ins, just to say, look, how are things going? We'll always see through stats if things aren't going well. You'll see drops in productivity. You'll see those patterns that I spoke about earlier. So for me, it's really about ensuring managers are supported from all the way from the top. So that culture from an organisation has to come all the way down, especially when you're working with remote working. But it's such an easy thing to start to implement, but it's such a difficult thing to get everybody on board with. But it really is about just taking that 5 minutes out, checking in with people, doing regular follow-ups with them, because again, they may feel that just if you've just picked up the phone and said, well, I don't think your performance is that great today. So it's really approaching it from a really empathetic point of view and saying, listen, I've noticed some changes. Could we meet for a coffee? Because even although we do remote working, most organisations have still got some days where you're in the office or there's team meetings or an opportunity to go for a coffee externally. And employees really appreciate the fact that you've taken some of that extra time out. They really then feel valued and listened to and noticed, because a lot of the time people want to just be under the radar and not have people recognise that they're not coping well, because it's a really difficult place for people to be. So my key thing for that would be take that extra time, do those regular check-ins with your team so that you're getting those more gentle, I used to call it the water cooler chat, because now when we work remotely, we don't get that opportunity to sit in the canteen and have a chat about how their weekend was. It might not be menopause. It could be a number of other things that are going on personally or whatever. But I think a really good manager will take the time to listen, take the time to learn new skills about what they're doing and lead with empathy, which will open up those conversations. And my other thing is it doesn't always have to be over Zoom. People can still meet in person. And most organisations can facilitate that at some point. So it's about using your skills to be flexible and actually going, this member of staff is really valuable to me. How am I going to create that atmosphere and talk to me about what's going on? So lots of different things that we can do to support those remote workers.
Thank you, Wendy. Anyone get anything else to add?
Yeah, just kind of to reiterate the creating the digital safe space of an online drop-in cafe. It doesn't need to be face-to-face all the time. But what, again, that does is give the employees an opportunity to share experience with employees going through the same thing with them. So although it's in the off chance that they maybe don't want to go to their manager or they don't want to open up, I've seen with experience the amount of people that come to these sessions and will say to me, wow, I didn't expect what I was going to get out of this. And another thing is maybe providing resources, develop a menopause toolkit with information, self-care strategies that they can kind of, we spoke, I think Wendy had mentioned a bit earlier about empowering these members of staff to take a bit more control because they feel out of control at this time of their life, and had that menopause toolkit with self-care strategies gives them a little bit more control, which in turn supports their well-being.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Well, can you believe it? That's our time up this afternoon. It's gone so quickly. I really want to say thank you to all our panel for their inputs. We hope it's been really useful, and thank you for everyone for joining us. And I hope you've heard about some things today that you can take back to your own organisations. But please do check us out online at lifelinkwworkwell.org.uk and follow us on LinkedIn. Also, if you're interested in getting in touch with us, even if it's just to answer some questions that we didn't or we weren't able to cover today, then please do so via our website or via LinkedIn. Some members of our team will be in touch with you to follow up, and a recording of the session will be sent on to you as well. So we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you very much for attending.